Welcome everybody to the new EdTech Classroom live stream of February, the February live stream. We've actually done more than one live stream this month. We did the Alice Keeler webinar earlier in the month, so we're double dipping this month. But today we're talking all about creativity, the treasures of creativity, what creativity can bring to your classroom, but really what are the challenges with implementing creativity in the classroom, because it's so easy to say you should let your kids be more creative. It is a whole other thing to figure out like how to actually do that. And I'm excited because we're gonna take with some community responses. Some folks shared a couple of the challenges they've been facing with implementing creativity in the classroom, and I'm going to be sharing some of my own challenges when I was in the classroom and when I tried to implement creativity. But Sam Carey, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Great to see you as well, Mr. Gibson. I'm super excited to be talking about creativity. Creativity is easily my favorite subject of all because I genuinely believe that it is such a key, like cornerstone component of an engaging classroom. And so I'm excited to hear your thoughts about some of the challenges, because some of these challenges are really real and we haven't actually talked about some of it beforehand to have this be authentic, to see what comes up and kind of our different suggestions. So if you do also have comments, questions that come up that you want to drop in the chat, be sure to do that. We're happy to address some of those questions live. Really interested in helping people figure out, how we can actually implement this stuff, not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. So I'm excited to have that conversation.
Yeah, and it's Thankful Thursday today. I asked in the chat what folks were thankful for. I said besides your friends and your family, because I feel that is sometimes the default answer, but Carol is thankful for her ability to smile, and we can see you smiling in your profile picture, Carol. And Carissa, or I'm thinking Carissa. Carissa is thankful for PD in her PJs. Yes. A few folks are thankful for that. But what are you thankful for today, Sam, on this Thankful Thursday?
It snowed and rained here in California, which it hasn't done since December. So I'm very thankful for that. We're getting a little bit worried out here. So yeah, definitely happy about the rain and snow. What about you?
I'm thankful for a new book that I'm pretty excited to start. It was actually recommended from a podcast that we both listen to, Video Creators, which is all about growing on YouTube. But the book, it's a faith-based book on what does it look like to be a person of faith, and what relationship does that play in your work. And so it was something, and it's called I can't remember what it's called. It's by a guy named Tim Keller. But I'm pretty excited reading it. I started reading it this morning, and excited to kind of learn and explore that intersection of the two aspects of my life that are really significant and important.
You'll have to tell me some key things you learned from it.
Yeah, tell me exactly what I need to do.
Give me the Cliff Notes version.
Exactly. Amy is thankful for being in Boston this weekend, coaching her volleyball team. Right on. Thankful for snow days. Everyone, can we give it up for snow days? Yeah, air horn for that. So, well, let's get started. Sam, you had a few things that you actually shared this week on one of our videos. We've been putting out quite a few videos this week. The last 4 are part of a video series that we're creating on what it means to be a 21st century teacher. And spoiler alert, make this your superpower was all about creativity. And so what are some of the things that we need to know? Give us the Cliff Notes version of the YouTube video that was all about creativity.
Yeah, so that video actually comes after the video where we talk about why universal design for learning is such a transformational framework for lesson design, in particular because it addresses the just reality of learner variability. So the second video is all about how we just can't continue to use one size fits all education. It's not reaching students. It's continued to fail us over and over again. And so in that video, the teacher superpower video that I'm referring to, or that you referred to, we're really talking about how creativity can become a superpower because it essentially means that you're really building a classroom that's built on a foundation of learner variability. So oftentimes when we're talking about learner variability, we're thinking about offering choice. And although we are going to talk about choice and how you could do that with creativity projects and choice boards and things like that, there's something actually inherent to the idea of expressing oneself creatively. There's something inherently choice-based about that. So that's one key element of it. It's just that you are actually infusing your classroom with choice and really optimizing it for learner variability. The other is that it is a really critical mindset shift to teach students. So when you're teaching students how to be creative and about the importance of creativity, really openly talking about that, you're helping shift them away from this outcomes-based mindset to more of a process-based mindset, so that we're actually starting to proactively teach that mistakes are expected and we can learn from mistakes and they're going to happen. The end product is the goal of the end product is not to replicate something, it's to come up with something new. And because of that, there's no kind of vision of perfection. There's no ideal that you have to reach, because the idea is we're actually all creating something original. So it's also this critical mindset shift. And then the last piece, and the reason why we folded into this whole idea of becoming a 21st century teacher, is because creativity, I think, is also really the key to making sure that we're creating learning experiences that are relevant, authentic, and valuable for learners. And that's also a core element of universal design for learning. So when we're actually having students creating and making things that they would actually potentially make in the real world, which is some of what we're going to talk about today, things like podcasts or videos. There was recently a Edutopia article that I sent to Tom about making a TED Talk video in the classroom. Those would all be ways for students to express themselves creatively while also doing something that has real world value. And with automation, machine learning, the changes that are coming to the future of work, it is predicted that the job of creator and the skill of creativity is really going to be the skill that sets people apart. It's going to be the job that is one of the only jobs that will be secure, because it's not a job that can be automated. And so we're also just preparing students for the future. It's what students want. It really kind of hits so many different nodes. So creativity, I think, can be an absolute game changer. That's why we call it your teacher superpower.
Yeah, and I like in the video you had mentioned how it's not just about, when you think creativity in the classroom, it's not kids just doing art projects. It's giving them an opportunity to create things, to show, to learn, to show what they know, and actually the aspect of learning happens during that creation process as well. But we're going to get into some of the audience questions, community questions that we had. But before we do that, we have a couple sponsors that we want to give it up for our sponsors. Yeah, sponsors.
Thank you.
Little light clap to Wacom and Screencastify. They support the work that we are doing here. Sam, can you tell us a little bit about Wacom? Who is Wacom? What is Wacom? And how can Wacom help us transform our classrooms?
So Wacom is a company that's been making digital pen tablets for quite some time. They started making them for digital artists and are now moving into education. And what's so powerful about a pen tablet is that it just unlocks so many elements of education technology. It unleashes the power of education technology. So this is an example. This is a one by Wacom. It's their most affordable pen tablet. They also have a more one that you can actually write directly on top of, that it would really be suited for somebody who really wants to be able to fully annotate on the screen and have complete control over that. So really great for like math teachers. And it just allows you to use all the programs that we teach about: digital whiteboards, annotating text, making more engaging video tutorials that you can actually annotate on and write on the screen the same way that you would with a pen. So love Wacom. It's they feel natural, and I just have fun using their pen tablets. I use them every single day, and I highly recommend people check them out. We have a discount code as well that we'll be sharing. We'll share it a little bit later. Is that right,
I was
Tom?
gonna share. I was gonna show your screen right now. Do you want to show where people can get? And I can put a link in the chat where folks can actually get the discount code if they want to get 20% off.
Perfect.
A couple of their boards.
Yep. So let me move it so that it's not being covered. So if you go to newedtechclassroom.com/partners, you can see some of our partner discounts. We have one with Wacom where you can get 20% off. If you need to use the code Wacom New EdTech, and you can get a Wacom 1 or a 1 by Wacom for 20% off. So that's available to anyone in our audience. So pop on over and check it out.
Yeah, and they make for great tools in a lot of different opportunities where you're getting students to create things. Maybe your students are actually creating screencasts and screen annotations, and so it'd be great to have at least one in the classroom. But I wanted to pull up, speaking of a math class, I wanted to pull up one of the questions that came from the community. Angela Proske. Angela asked, how would you implement creativity in a 4th grade metrics units of conversion? So you're thinking kilometers to meters or centimeters to decimeters. And so I kind of tried to think of something kind of off the top of my head, and then we'll kind of hear what you think, Sam, give you a little bit of time to think about it as well, considering you weren't the math teacher in the classroom, but I spent a little more time with the math, but maybe you can bounce off some of my ideas that I have. So what I was thinking with metric conversion, the main goal that we want is we want students to be able to understand how to convert. How do you convert from meters to kilometers? How do you convert from decimeters to millimeters? And so a lot of students, they memorize like, oh, I need to move the decimal 2 places to the right or 1 place to the left or something like that. But we really want them to know why they do that. So we want them to be able to do it, to be able to convert between different metric units, and we want them to be able to explain why. So what I would do is I would actually have students demonstrate 3 different conversions that they choose, that they pick. And it has to be a mix of converting a larger unit to a smaller unit, as well as converting a smaller unit to a larger unit. They can't just do 3 versions of converting centimeters to millimeters or something like that. And they would have to not only show the 3 different conversions and explain what those conversions are. What would 25 centimeters be if you converted it to millimeters? They would actually have to pick 3 different objects get the actual metric unit of it, and then convert it to another metric unit. And they would have to explain. They can't just say, "Oh, I'm converting from centimeters to millimeters, so I moved the decimal one place over." They have to explain why. They have to go through the process of like, well, each one of these units is 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times bigger or smaller. And based on our base 10 system, like when you move the decimal one place, that's the same as multiplying by 10 or dividing by 10. And so I would give them the opportunity to make a video where they explain this, or I'd give them the opportunity to make a podcast recording to kind of go through this process and be like, all right, well, right now we've got this coaster, and this coaster is 6 centimeters. Everyone write that down, 6 centimeters. And if we are going to find out what this coaster is in millimeters, maybe we've got a millimeter measurement. They just go through and they make it really fun. Or they could write a blog post and include visuals and everything like that. What I would say as far as the practical side of things, I would make sure I would keep a limit of 2 minutes on everything. So I'm not going to listen to a 20-minute podcast on how to make 3 conversions or a 20-minute video or anything like that. So they need to learn how do I concisely explain this, but also show my knowledge and show the three different conversions. And I know, Sam, you talked about this in your video. Like, what about someone who kind of feels like how do I offer? My kids have never done any of this. How am I going to offer, a podcast and a video recording and a blog post option? Like, that just feels like too much. What would you say to that teacher?
Yeah, I would say don't offer all those options. I will say, I think you're actually spot on with identifying that the place to offer creativity in an assignment like that is in the explanation. I think oftentimes when we hear creativity, and I know this is true for myself, that I would be inclined to try to turn that into an art project, that we're going to break out all these materials and students are going to make objects that they would measure and then convert, but that's not actually increasing the rigor at all. And so I think that's actually a common mistake, at least I know that I made at times when I was thinking about introducing creativity. So I think you're actually spot on with thinking about how we can get students to make something with technology as a way to explain their thinking, to teach others as well. And I might just add to that one way actually of bringing in some variety and choice, if you're going to stick with just one format. So let's say you don't feel like you are prepared yet to offer students a blog and a podcast and a video, then you're just going to stick with one. But you could make it valuable enough so that students, what they produced was something different than what another student produced intentionally, so that they had to there was value in that end product for other students to go learn from. So they, could maybe choose some aspect of the conversion, like something that they were going to teach in their video, and they were responsible for that. And then other students would then have to go watch those videos or listen to the podcast, because that is also an important element of creativity. We want to be able to have students share their work with an authentic audience and have it be meaningful, so that students would actually have to go, take notes, learn something from these other videos. And to this other question, which I know we're planning to talk about as well, that applies beyond just this example of this whole idea of providing choice, right? And offering choice. And actually, I meant Tom to pull up one of the choice boards that we had. I don't know if you can pull that up while I'm talking for a second here, but
yeah, I can grab it.
In some of the videos that we've shown this week, we've shown these choice boards and, some of the options, and you'll often see this too, when people talk about creating with technology, that there will be this whole array of choices. And Tom mentioned 3, right? Videos and blogs and podcasts. But I think it's also a mistake to think that you just roll out with that you start by just putting all of these different projects on a choice board and think that is going to go well. I mean, I don't actually think anybody thinks that's going to go well, but think that that's what we're supposed to do, because that's what offering choice means. So yeah, like this one is a pick your project choice board. Now, this is actually a project choice board that I use. So this is a legitimate project choice board. But I did not give my students all of these choices until I had actually taught each of these or taught my students how to do each of them separately. So it's not like the first time they saw how to, or saw like a podcast in particular on a choice board, it's very involved, or making a video. Not the first time that they had seen that. Maybe if you're working with older students, you could get away with like a presentation, infographic, things like that. But again, and actually, Tom, if you go back to that choice board, if you're going to do that, you still need to make sure that you're providing resources for students. So if you notice right there on the link, there is a video tutorial for students to be able to watch to learn how to do that. The graphic organizers are all there. So you would have to really strategically set that up, even potentially like with a hyperdoc where you're really chunking things and breaking things down for them. But the more you put on a choice board like this without pre-teaching it, the more diluted they're going to become. So yes, somebody might make a podcast, but the chances of it being this really rigorous, high quality podcast are pretty low. And so there are different schools of thought here, but I don't personally believe that offering choice means you have to just give students the ability to choose from all these different demonstrations of learning right off the bat. There are lots of ways you can optimize individual assignments for choice. There are different ways that students can choose. And I actually do believe that inherent in the process of creating something, there's choice built into that. If you are having students make a podcast, no one podcast is going to look like the other. There is kind of learner variability built into that. And there's all kinds of things you can still have students choose within a single project like that. So I would highly recommend doing them first, and then you can put them on a choice board, maybe second semester or even toward the end of the year.
Right on. Well, speaking of other tools that you can be using in the classroom, I've got this little Scream Deck, and I don't know where my buttons are. Oh, well, I'm going to have to click on my screen. A little behind the scenes here about my, here we go. There's the button. And we also switch sides. Screencastify is also our other sponsor. I do have a little bit about Screencastify. We're pretty big fans of Screencastify. We've used it for creating video lessons, and it is a Chrome extension that you can basically create videos where either just you or just your screen or both, and you can have students do the same thing. What's really cool is if you're in a school where it's very difficult to get permission to be able to install extensions, or kids try to install it on their own devices, and they're like, I need to put the password in, and I don't know the password, and my mom says I can't call her when she's at work, and I tried calling her last time. You're like, okay, whatever. So the great thing about Screencastify is they've actually got a feature called Submit, where your students are able to make a screencast without even having the Screencastify extension installed, which is super cool. And it is probably the most robust editor when it comes to online screencasting that I have found, where you can do, if you watch any of our YouTube videos, we use a really professional $100 program where we're like zooming into different parts of the screen and things like that. You can actually do the same thing in Screencastify, and you can blur out sections of your screen, and it's fairly simple too. So we really love Screencastify, and they support us here at New EdTech Classroom. So check out screencastify.com if you are looking for a screencasting application for both you and your students. That's going to be really simple to use and really robust. And you can even do editing. You can edit videos that are not recorded in Screencastify as well, which is super cool.
Yeah, and I think actually screencasting is an excellent creativity project, or not even a project. It's a way that you can add a layer of creation with technology to an assignment. So you may have students actually do something like draft an essay. They have all the steps that they had to go through to draft that essay, from researching to filling out notes to filling out graphic organizers and then putting together some drafts. actually having them screencast that and explain their whole process then becomes this layer of metacognition that you can add onto that assignment. You've taught them something powerful about how to create with technology, a skill that's going to transcend your classroom through teaching them how to screencast and how to do that well. And then if you start to use some of the other elements, like some of the call outs that you can do, the annotations on the screen, then you're starting to incorporate some video editing. So again, that would be an example of how you could incorporate some creativity into something that is maybe actually, I mean, you're still going to have traditional assignments that you have to do, and students still need to learn how to write and do traditional essays, but you can add these layers to them so that we turn them into something that's more applicable for the 21st century and also adds this layer of creating with technology to it. And that's a great way to start too. So you're not kind of like doing this whole overhaul. You're starting with something you already do and adding some tweak like that, a layer on top of it.
Yeah. And so one of the other challenges that came up from someone in the community, I'm actually going to read it. This one is from Alicia. Let me zoom out here. So Alicia said I'm excited about the new PD you are offering. I'm on the wait list. Woo, wait list, air horn. While I was watching the video, I was thinking about the hurdles I have for implementing creativity. Time seems to be an issue. All the standards I am required to teach in kindergarten is overwhelming. Putting aside the traditional way of teaching is a barrier. I'm at a loss on how to go about this in a kindergarten class. Negative views from colleagues is an issue for my own mindset, and people are resistant to change even if it is what is best for the education of their students. So a few struggles that I'm seeing here. Time, the time struggle. The challenge of working with really early learners, kindergarten, learning things just happen at a slower pace in a kindergarten classroom. You can't just say like, all right, watch this video and open up the tab and then go to your Google Drive and then also being in a culture, a school culture that doesn't foster this type of growth and creativity in the classroom. So what are some of your thoughts on this, Sam, for Alicia? She's wanting to do this work, but there are these barriers. We've been talking about barriers to entry with universal lesson design, usually in the context of making sure there are no barriers to our lessons for our students. But what are the barriers? You're seeing barriers that Alicia's facing and wanting to incorporate creativity. So what can we say to teachers in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things there that require like unpacking. I'd say really quickly we get this question a lot about how do you get people on board at your school who are not necessarily inclined to want to change their practices. And I think that there's really one answer, and that answer is to always link things to something that you already mutually agree upon. So if you mutually agree that you should be doing your part, for example, to prepare students for their futures, then you show how the work you're doing does that. Or if people agree that active participation is better than passive participation, then it's incumbent upon us who are trying to advocate for different practices to show how a new strategy or a new tool can actually help us achieve that goal more effectively. So I think that's pretty much always the answer. And also just, that you will influence people by doing things differently in your classroom. People will start to take notice of the fact that other kids are excited to be in your classroom and things like that and talk about your class. The other question about standards, this is another question that comes up a lot. And I saw some comments about, what about preparing students for a test? The two are not mutually exclusive. One, first of all, even in a classroom that is built around universal design for learning and creativity, it doesn't mean that you're not potentially doing some test prep at times. I mean, if test structures are potentially going to be a barrier for students and access to, opportunities, then should we occasionally also teach them, how to manage a test and things like that? Sure. It doesn't mean you totally get rid of things like that. But in general, I think, if we think about things just in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, that we have higher order thinking skills involved in creating, making, explaining, teaching. And you cannot do those higher order thinking skills unless you can also do the lower order thinking skills. So this really gets to the idea that when you are coming up with something like a creativity project, it's not an art project. It's something that is rigorous and ideally that has all the standards essentially built into the project. So anything that you are teaching, be that, let's say, for example, it's a grammar standard, and say you also have some content standards around, something like characterization, and then you have some other standards that are writing standards and things like that. Think of how much more powerful it is to have students actually applying what they've learned about those particular skills by making something, doing something with those skills, and actually having to make something authentic and new with it. And if you can do that, then you know it. It's so I think it's a what am I trying to say? Like it's a false choice, that you have to choose between having students do these creativity projects and project-based learning and hands-on learning, experiential learning, that you have to choose between that and preparing students more effectively for tests. Students that are actually engaged in hands-on real world application of learning, they're the ones who are going to do better on tests because they understand the material from a much in a much deeper way. And I know, Tom, you have some like a rubric that reflects that too.
Oh yeah. I'll pull up the rubric in a second. But the idea also is like teaching them creativity will, like you said, trickle down and give them the skills that they need for standardized tests. But it doesn't work the other way around. Like if you spend a lot of time doing test prep, you're not preparing students for situations that don't have, for problems that don't have a simple multiple choice answer. My wife is a pediatrician, and she just talks about how so much of med school, you've got, you have all the information that you need for a problem, and it's boiled down into like 4 answers, and you're like, all right, let me figure out what's one. But that's not what it's like. If you've ever watched an episode of House, you always know like you don't have complete information most of the time, and you've got to problem solve, and you've got to kind of find other ways of finding a solution. And you don't get to pick out of a predetermined set of solutions most of the time. You have to figure out what those solutions are. And so I do like that. Focusing on students creating and getting the opportunities to create in the classroom will in turn make them probably do pretty well, or they will still learn the skills they need for standardized tests in most cases, as Sam explained, but it does not work the other way around. But you said you wanted me to bring up the rubric. I've got a rubric here. Let's see.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. So let me give a little context for this. I wanted students to write about math. I wanted them to actually, this was called the Math in My Own Words rubric, and it originally started as a math blog that we used Adobe Spark, which is now known as Adobe Creative Cloud. And I wanted the weight of what I actually cared about to be reflected in this rubric. It wasn't the same points all the way around. So they were assessed on how well I felt that they explained the why behind the math, and they could see exactly what exceeds, meets, approaching, and below expectations are. They were given prompts to reflect on, because this was pre-algebra, so just saying, reflect on that lesson. A lot of students were like, I don't know what to write. And so I generally gave them some prompts to work off of, and if they went above and beyond, or if they just answered the prompts. And then I assessed them on the blog on readability and what that looked like, learning those digital citizenship and writing skills, and like, how do you write a blog, and what goes into a blog. And we actually, they were assessed on comments, and getting comments from both people within the community and outside the community, because like you said earlier, Sam, like we want to give students an authentic audience. I didn't want to be the only person that was reading this, whether it was just some of their colleagues, or I also had a database of other math educators that said that they would be willing to read some of these blogs, and I would connect the students with those people, and then they would give feedback to the students, and they knew that there was an authentic audience. But to your point about having kind of like a choice in this, I had them also, if they wanted to do a video, song, or comic, there was basically the exact same rubric, but it changed. Instead of readability, this section changed to presentability, and I gave some criteria based on what they did. I don't really like the structure of this as much anymore, and I think I'd probably do more of a choice board style, but this was the general format of how I was assessing some of their creative work. But what was it that you wanted to point out with this, Sam?
Well, first of all, I have a couple things I would revise about it. I mean, and that's not a, it's not a criticism. It's,
me too.
They're even looking at mine, I'm like, there are lots of things I would revise about mine. So that's one. And, I think to the point about standards, it is still incumbent upon us to make sure that we are teaching certain standards, right? Like, it's not like those are going out the window. And really the way to also hold ourselves accountable to that kind of stuff is to make it visible in a rubric. So if in a rubric, for example, you really make explicit that students need to, I would have in a rubric, for example, you need to have one compound sentence, one complex sentence, and one compound complex sentence. And we have different color coding system. You have to color code those to be able to identify those. Mm-hmm. So that was in a rubric for a larger project where students were doing writing as a piece of this other larger creativity project. But I spelled that rubric or spelled out the standard in the rubric. So that is still important. There are, varying qualities of rubrics. And this is something it's taken me a long time to learn as well. One thing that I would suggest to people, and this is perhaps something that you don't have the power to do depending on, how the grading system at your school works. But if possible, I would move away from point-based systems like you have and move into more of a mastery-based system that's on a 4-point scale. That was actually a transition that we did at my school over the course of 2 or 3 years that I was part of the team that led that transition. It's not an easy transition to make when you have to convert grade books and your whole grading system and teach people what mastery-based grading means. But when you're mastery-based grading, it's also really important. Actually, can you put that back up, sure. Tom? So this is something that actually, if you look at a lot of my rubrics, I have language like this too in the prompts where these are more about completion. Like you've answered something or it's missing something, and all of my rubrics, in fact, my rubrics still have that kind of language. But, the more that I've continued to learn, the more we can try to it's less about quantity of things you do, and it's more about, did you meet the standard? Did you meet the criteria for each of those to the best of our ability? That's hard to do. And when you're first building a rubric, we have this inclination to build them like went above and beyond, exceeded expectations, like met expectations, but that's kind of nebulous and hard, I think, to really put your finger on. It's hard for a student to look at and say like, oh, I met expectations, or, I did this, like it has this kind of, I guess in that case it's explicit, like you completed it, but if you completed it and didn't do it well, like, do you still get that sort of a thing? So, I think when a perspective that we can have about rubrics too, and this is a whole separate conversation that we should have at some point, Tom, but is about grading and teaching students to self-assess, teaching students to peer assess. And when you start thinking about a rubric in terms of a self-assessment, it really has to be spelled out and specific, that if it's vague, it doesn't help a person actually self-assess. So when we start to think about it through that lens, like, well, when I put this in front of a student and they have to look at it and use it to actually revise their work to improve it, and use it to, look at themselves and say, like, this is where I think I am, and this is how I think I can improve. And so we linked at my school our mastery-based grading to our student-led conferences. So students would have to talk about their progress in mastery-based standards, and it's tough. It's not something you do overnight. It's something you have to do over the course really of years. And in fact, all this stuff, like we're about to release a video or a little hint, preview where I'm going to show like how I started all the way back in the beginning and like continually iterated and, until I had these like really amazing create with technology projects, but like that happened over the course of 10 years. And I do think we can accelerate that when we learn certain skills and knowledge for sure. But it's not something we should expect is just, we're just going to turn right around and do tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you've been watching any of the videos that we've been putting out this week that's talking about becoming this 21st century teacher and this aspect of creativity in it, you've heard that we've been creating a professional development platform or professional development program for educators that are wanting to begin to implement these types of practices centered around universal design for learning and technology integration. And so this is a little sneak peek of 21st century teacher, which is the program that we are now developing. Look at that guy. How would you not want to be a part of this program when you're in with that? But we've got all these different ways that you can learn these skills. It's going to be very much like, let me pull up. Which one should I pull up, Sam? One of the example lessons here.
Yeah, I think that big picture, if you go back actually to if you go to the learning pathways. So a lot of online professional development is only this kind of search-based content, actually kind of like our channel where you might search for like a program you're looking for or a strategy you're looking for, but it's not linked, it's not connected to these other ideas. And I think that actually succumbs to like one of the main things we're also trying to teach people not to do differently, which is to make sure that you're linking all this stuff to these bigger picture concepts, these compelling ideas. So that's what we've done here as well. We do have searchable content. So if you need to like learn how to use a program, you can search for it and find it. If you want to build skills in like organizing your cloud storage, you can search for that and find that. But we also have linked together lesson sequences so that we're actually getting you to engage in some of these interesting, essential questions, big picture questions about the state of education and things like that. And we're engaging you with those bigger picture questions that are compelling and interesting and in and of themselves. While doing that, teaching you the instructional strategies and apps, teaching you through those instructional strategies and apps so you can actually experience them before you would go about using them. And then we also have this layer where we teach you how to use them so that you can actually take them and use them. So we have embedded choice boards so you can choose. We have interactivity apps so you actually are getting on and practicing annotating on a web page with the group and seeing what that's like to see if that might work for you and your students. So we're really trying to give people an experience, an experiential learning experience so that you can actually see what this stuff is like for yourself and not just sit and listen to us talking about it, but actually experience it, see if it works for you, and also talk about like the problems that might come up and implementation concerns and things like that. So it's a robust community. People will have like a profile and you can actually post examples of lessons and get feedback and stuff like that. So we're looking for people who are engaged and, ready to like take the plunge and interested in really building these skills. And we're excited to work with a group. We're going to have 250 teachers and we're actually launching, so we go public on Monday, but we have an early bird wait list that you have to, in order to be on that list, you have to sign up for the wait list, or you have to enter your email to sign up for the wait list. And that gets you a link a day before it goes available to the general public. When the last time we created a major program, the 21st Century Classroom, it sold out on that day. So it never actually went available to the general public. So I definitely recommend, if you are interested, that you get your name on the early bird wait list. And then you'll get a link. Is it 10 o'clock in Pacific time? Is that the right? I'm pretty sure it's yes. 10 a.m. Yeah. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday to be able to register. And then we're going to start we have some challenges set up and I'm super excited about it. So I can't wait to start working with people.
Yeah, we're getting down to the wire. So if you haven't joined the waitlist yet, there is a link in the chat, newedtechclassroom.com/21st century teacher, if you want to join in. And we're also creating a couple more videos that we're hopefully going to get out by the end of the week on becoming these 21st century teachers to continue to support you. But thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Thanks so much to our sponsors, Wacom and Screencastify. And hopefully we'll see you on the wait list. And we hope that y'all have a good rest. Y'all, I'm from Austin. We hope that y'all have a good rest of the day. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.